one big major problem that we have within the coonhound community, one big major problem that we have as a whole, as compounders, as whatever, is we've all heard it, okay? We all know it to be true, that we have these very good, exceptional animals that are top-notch performers, that do it the way it's supposed to be done, and they do it at an elite level. The problem is they will not produce, okay? So they are horrible at reproducing. And we hear this all the time. It's one of the biggest complaints that I hear. You go to any podcast, when they're talking about this stuff, it's always brought up. He's a phenomenal dog, but he just won't produce. These big name dogs just don't produce. Okay, so what is this exactly? Okay, so this is called prepotency. Okay, I'll put a picture of that right there. Definition of this is basically a dog's ability to reproduce itself. Okay, so throw a clone, produce over other genetics, just a dog that is a good producer. Okay, so there is basically two ways that we have prepotency. One is the exception to the rule, and one is the rule. Okay, so the exception to the rule is a dog just being a natural prepotent producer. The meaning that there's no thought into the way that he was bred. He's just any other old animal, a scatterbred dog, but he has the ability to be prepotent and he produces over other animals. Okay, that is the exception to the rule. All right, so the rule of thumb here is a prepotent dog is a dog that is line bred, that is inbred, a dog that has a homozygosity within its gene pool, meaning that it is bred to relation, right? So the lineage behind it is of relations. And basically the way that we look at this, and basically the way that we can see this, is the fact that when an animal produces, they're not technically reproducing themselves, okay? They're reproducing the genetics that go into them from behind them, okay? And the way that this works, and the way that we all break this down, is obviously we know the fact that the father of our dog puts 50% in, the grandfather of our dog puts 25% in, the great-grandfather puts in 12.5, and the great-great-great-grandfather puts in 6.25. Okay, so the way that genetics work on dogs is it's a cumulative, okay? So it's a cumulative of inheritance, okay? So I believe it's something like a quarter. This is how they do the math for this. So it'd be the dad, the inheritance DNA is only a quarter of relation. The relation would be 50%. So it would only be technically, the father would only be technically putting in 25. But the way that this works, like I said, is it's accumulative. So the more times that an animal shows up in the pedigree, you add that to it, okay? So let's say that we have an animal that has the same grandfather 3 times, okay? So we would add that up. So a grandfather is 25% of inheritance, or 25% of relation. 25, 25, 25. He is contributing 75% of the genetics to that animal, okay? So basically the way that this all works out is we have a scale. The more homozygosity that you have, the more risk for disease and genetic failures, or whatever you want to call it, defects, go up, okay? So the tighter bred we are, that goes up, but also prepotency goes up. The lower that our inbreeding and our line breeding and our relation is, the lower the prepotency is, okay? So that is how that goes. But also the lower that the relation is, the lower that the risk for disease is, okay? So when we understand that, we all know this to be true. Inbreeding and line breeding and getting things that are too related to be bred together too tightly, too closely, causes genetic problems to pop up, whether that be deafness, blindness, scoliosis, kink tails, low litter rates, whatever. There's all these issues that go along with being too tightly bred. Why is that? Okay, so this is the big question, and this is the big reason behind this, is because a lot of genetic diseases, a lot of genetic defects are recessive, okay? So what happens when we put two recessives together, the recessive has a chance to become the dominant trait, okay? So that is why we get these to pop up into surface when we are line breeding and inbreeding. But through the process of culling, we can cull out disease, we can cull out genetic defects, we can cull out all these problems and purify a bloodline. And when we purify a bloodline, the risk of disease goes down, okay? So let's go back to talking about the prepotency again. It's an accumulative type of DNA. The tighter bred that we are, let's say the same dog pops up 4 or 5 times in one pedigree, the animal that is holding that genetic DNA from that lineage is going to consist more of that one dog's genetic DNA. So what does that mean going forward? That means that when that animal reproduces, the combination of genes that it has to mix with another animal goes down, okay? So we are getting down and we are microscoping onto a specific gene set and saying, this dog, when we go to roll the dice and mix it with another animal, it only has so many numbers that it can roll, right? And basically the way that this works, they do this in game fowl, they do this in pigs and sheep and cows. Any animal, domesticated animal that we have has been bred these ways and genetically not naturally selected, but unnaturally selected, so man selection. So we are selecting animals to breed, and this is how this works. So the way we breed animals, there's a couple different ways, especially for dogs, okay? So dogs, if we want to create a new breed of animals, we're going to use a lot more inbreeding. We're going to be a lot more tightly bred to hammer out and sift through all the genetics that we don't want this breed to have, and then we will breed forward from a very inbred type of line of dogs, okay? We can create a strain of animals. So a strain within a breed would be like, within the treeing feist, we have the Barger stock feist, okay? So within a breed, we have a strain. And then it would be like, okay, so within the breed of treeing walkers, or within the breed of walker coonhounds, we have the July walkers, and we have the treeing walkers, and we have the running walkers. These are all strains, okay? Within the strains, we have bloodlines, okay? So bloodlines within a strain of animals, or within a breed of animals, would be like, okay, this dog is a wipeout bred dog. This dog is a stylish bred dog. This dog is a jet bred dog, a hammer bred dog. Them are bloodlines, okay? So basically we are microscoping down the gene pool and focusing in on some particular subset of genetics that we want to produce and we want to move forward. So when we talk about having these animals that aren't very good producers, but they're fantastic and phenomenal animals, but they don't have the ability to reproduce over other animals, the best ability and the best chance that we can possibly do is we need to inbreed or line breed that animal, and we need to populate a pedigree with that particular animal's DNA. We need to populate a pedigree with that particular animal's name, lineage, whatever you say. So we want it to be a grandfather and a great-grandfather, or a grandfather on the top and a grandfather on the bottom. We want him to be the dad and the grandpa. We want him to be on there to contribute more DNA. And the more DNA that we can get this animal to contribute to a particular animal, when that animal goes to reproduce, it is going to produce over other animals, which is prepotency. Okay, so like I said, the more tightly bred we are, the more prepotent that we are, okay? So the more tightly bred that animal is, the prepotency goes up, which means it has an ability to produce over other animals. So when we go and we take a scatterbred dog and breed it to a line bred or an inbred dog, the line bred or the inbred dog does not have a 50-50% rate. It almost goes to a 80-20 scale. When a line bred animal meets a scatterbred animal, 80-20 is going to come out the other end. 80% of those animals produced should be like the line bred animal, or should be like the prepotent animal or the inbred animal, whatever you want to call it. So when we are going through line breeding, and I made the video, the one prior to this, selection is key. Why is selection so key when we're talking about line breeding, inbreeding, prepotency, all of these things? Why? We are talking about calling out and getting rid of the bad genetics. And the more alike that a dog is, the more, like I said, recessive carrying things come to the surface. And a lot of animals and a lot of breeds of animals carry recessive diseases that don't show unless they get put with another recessive, right? And this is just kind of true throughout a lot of different things and a lot of different ways of breeding. So yes, without a doubt, we can take a non-producing, fantastic, phenomenal animal and turn it into a very awesome producing animal. It's not going to be the animal itself directly, but we can change the tide of the waters, and we can take a dog that is awesome, has an awesome gene set. We can isolate genes, and we can line breed and inbreed on those genes, select for those specific genes, and after we populate a decent amount of our pedigree, however people want to do it, however tightly bred that you want to breed them, as long as we're reproducing that same animal through inbreeding, basically, or through line breeding, basically we can, another generation down or 2 generations down, we can select an animal to be the stud for that particular dog. And when he throws, or he goes out and he breeds, he will reproduce and he will breed over and will produce animals like himself going forward off of that. So we have a lot of good examples of these dogs on the top producers list. When you go and you check some of the biggest top producers on that list, you will find that a lot of them are double and triple and even quadrupled up on a particular name set, or a particular bloodline of animals, or they're line bred. So take TrackMan for example. You can go on TrackMan's pedigree and you will find not only one name on his pedigree that is multiple times, but multiple, like 3 or 4 different really good animals are populated in his pedigree multitudes of times. What does that kind of do? That is taking the really some of the best animals that were going at that time and breeding them together in such a good way that they mesh and they produce TrackMan, okay? But he is also now very prepotent to reproduce any type of these multitudes of names and these multitudes of animals. And that is just kind of like the way that it works. And when we're talking about TrackMan in particular, I mean, he's produced almost 4,000 pups. And of that 4,000 animals, of that 4,000 pups, a lot of the good has been selected out. And we have an ability to reach in and grab out. We have an overproduction to go ahead and sift through all the bad genetics, sift through all the coals, sift through all the diseases and all this stuff, and pick out the animals that are most like TrackMan. And then we have the birth of the TrackMan line. We have the birth of multitudes of different animals and things like that. So basically the way that this works out is, the whole point in telling you guys all this stuff and the whole point in giving you guys this information is, number one, to be very knowledgeable about the way that our dogs are bred, so we can understand the calculations and understand this dog acts this particular way for this reason. When I look at his paperwork, he is bred onto such and such 4 different times, 5 different times in his pedigree. This animal most likely acts like that kind of dog. And we can identify through that different traits that run through different bloodlines, and we can identify what traits then mix well with other traits. One thing that I want to just put out there and I'll make very clear, I'm not against breeding the best of the best of the best. I'm not against any of that. I think the only way that we can guarantee, because there's never a guarantee in anything when we're talking about genetics or dog breeding or dog training, well, we can guarantee the best of our ability that we have a consistent animal going forward. We can ensure that we are producing consistency, and consistency seems to be one of the biggest tragedies that run through the coonhound breed, and it is just because a lot of guys just want a dog to be what they want the dog to be. They don't care about bloodlines. They don't care about this. They don't care about breeding, and they just throw a dog on the wayside because it's not what they want. It's not exactly what they want. We have an ability as a human being and have our domesticated animals. We can create any animal that we want to create through proper genetics, through any of these things. Now, one thing that I'm going to touch on while I'm here is the stud dog that I have found for Tilly. Okay, so I'm going to explain to you guys kind of how I stumbled across this animal. I want to explain some of the reasons as to why I picked that animal to be a stud for Tilly. Okay, so for number one, as you guys witnessed through the pedigree video, we see Tilly's pedigree. Tilly has Barger blood in her, okay? So one thing that I know of the Barger blood is that it is consistent, okay? So we have a very good strain of animals through the Bargers. We have a very good strain of animals that have been put together for a very long extended period of time, whether they were bred tight, bred however they were bred. We have a big name strain of treeing fights that have a reputation that has been maintained for a long period of time. That consistency is what has drew me to picking a Barger dog to stud Tilly to. Not only that, but there's more reasoning behind this. Okay, so number one, when Tilly was probably 3 or 4 months old, I went to a squirrel hunt and I seen this dog, and I was introduced to this dog, and my first thoughts on this animal was, wow, oh my goodness, that is such a good looking dog. I really, really was kind of awestruck at how awesome that dog was in person. Okay, so pictures don't do justice, whatever, but meeting that dog in person really kind of just perked my interest through the roof. And then I found out it was a Barger dog, and it just kind of solidified that. So even at 4 months old, when I met this dog, I was like, I need to breed Tilly to this animal because I want whatever that is. Okay, so I really like that animal. And along with that came the guy telling me, you know, the dog is doing fantastic. He's treed over a couple hundred squirrels already, the whole thing. And then I called Stacy Barger and I talked to Stacy Barger, and he explained to me how that animal is bred and how Tilly was bred and how they would be very good together and be doubling up on a very good dog. So we're building prepotency there. We're building a line there. We're reestablishing some type of relation back to them that is not too tightly bred. That would be a good option. Okay, and from what I understand, we broke down the pedigrees. I had a couple different options that I could have went with. I kind of shied away from going the Dexter blooded route because Tilly is already kind of tightly bred that way. She has a lot of Dexter in her. I could try to reproduce a Dexter dog, but the chances of me getting what I actually truly want out of that is probably pretty low. From what I'm gathering and from the information that I have, I think some of the incorrectness that goes into Tilly is coming from that side. Okay, so it's coming from that Dexter side. And when I combine that even tighter, the chances of producing animals that are even more kind of not correct, it goes up. So what I would want to do is go to a line of dogs, or go to a blood of animal that is going to fix some of the things that Tilly needs to have fixed. And readily available, I have that little black dog, correct bite. He's built very well. The only issue that I have kind of visually seen on that animal so far is he is a little cow hawkish as well. Okay, so Tilly is a little cow hawkish, or a little tight in the rear legs. That dog seems to be kind of that as well. Now, for the trade-offs of that, I would be hopefully producing a smaller animal, a tighter physiqued animal. We would be introducing darker coloration of the skin. We'd be introducing tighter feet. We'd be introducing the correct bite. We'd be introducing correct top line. So he checks a lot of the boxes that I want checked as far as a physical traits being fixed within Tilly. Now, we run the risk of having even more cowhawk dogs, and we also run the risk of them not being cowhawked at all. It's just kind of the roll of the dice. Is that a recessive? Is that a dominant? Is that going to compound? Is that going to go away when we mix these two dogs together? We just kind of don't know. Are the cowhawk legs so awfully bad that it is just a complete fault to no end? No, not at all. They're just very minutely cowhawked. And with that, one of my subscribers, Jacob Fryer, thank you, man. I kind of overlooked exactly what he was pointing out. Okay, is that dog a sight and eyes and ears kind of dog, or is he a nosy kind of dog? I don't know that information firsthand. Okay, so I don't know that information firsthand. Well, the information that I do have is that dog is a very good hunting dog. Okay, so that's the information that I am provided with. Am I okay to roll the dice whether it is a nosy animal or a sight and ears animal on the chance that the dog actually hunts a lot better than Tilly does? Absolutely. I'm really willing to go that extra step. So let's say what happens when we can breed a nosy animal back into Tilly and try to get rid of the sight and ears and bring in a nosy thing. But what we can do is get stuck in the middle. Right? We can get stuck in the middle, or we can get one that's really good this way, one that's really good that way. We're lowering consistency. But if we take two sight and ears dogs and we put two sight and ears dogs together and one's better, the hope would be to produce a even better sight and ears animal. Now, am I so happy with that? No, it's not. I'm not the biggest fan of that, but I think that goes a lot into squirrel hunting, and that's just the whole thing, right? That's just the whole thing. But I think if I can take the step in the correct direction, the animals that will be produced, okay, so let's just think about this. Now, a lot of guys are going to disagree with me on this. A lot of guys are going to look down upon me for thinking about like this way. If I take Tilly and I cross her to the Barger blood, boom, and then we produce an animal, okay? That animal's pedigree is going to be Barger, okay? We are going to move that over to a Barger blood with a grandfather of Pig and a great-great-great-grandfather of Dexter, or a great-grandfather of Dexter on this animal. Tilly's dad is Pig, okay? Her grandfather is Dexter. Now what I can do is take this Barger breeding, take a male dog, and breed that dog back to Tilly. Now, this is where you guys are going to lose me. A lot of guys are going to go, oh, no, don't do that. But if I bred Tilly's son back to her, then what do I have? Out of that cross, out of that production, Tilly to her son breeding out of this Barger dog. Then I have animals that come out of that breeding that are doubled up now on world champions. So we have top and bottom of world champion animals on these pedigrees. So what does that give me? What does that give me? That gives me a very, very, very high chance of reproducing Pig or reproducing Dexter off of a Tilly son breeding. Or it allows me to create an animal that is very, very, very prepotent to reproduce Pig. Okay? So that would be the idea behind this. Now, I have not dead set or, I have not really solidified any of this, but this is an idea that could be made, okay? Or another idea is to breed her to this Barger dog, get a female and breed that Barger dog back to his daughter, and then I have created a prepotent dog on this other radar dog that is an exceptional animal. So we have options, and Tilly is bred in such a way that it gives me that option to go one way or the other, or this way or that way. We can really have a lot of options made for Tilly's blood in particular. Now, that we have learned that if I breed Tilly to the Barger dog, produce a male, breed it back to Tilly, then we produce animals that are doubled up on a world champion bloodlines. Is that such a bad thing? Is that such a bad thing? Especially if we get correctness. So if I take her, cross her over to a correct animal, produce a correct animal of herself, breed them back to each other, produce another correct animal that is now a correct animal. I have fixed problems in Tilly. I have doubled up on the producing blood in her DNA, and I have also now created a good animal with a lot of potential to be a very good producing animal. So that is kind of the thought process. Am I going to do this? I don't know. And it's just kind of like we're going to roll with it and see what I think. We're going to see what comes out of this Barger cross, and then we'll go from there. If I produce an animal out of the Barger cross that I think is a really good improvement on Tilly, then maybe we will try to breed it back to her and get an improved animal directly out of her again. And then that animal is going to be basically a super animal of what Tilly's supposed to be. And then we're amplifying her blood. We're amplifying the good things. We're creating prepotency. We're creating a line. We're creating a strain of animals off of pig if we do that, right? But I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know this is a long one, and I talked a lot about not doing these videos anymore, but there's so much that goes into this. I can't not, and I've talked about this, and I said this when I did my first ever genetics, first ever any video, that I kind of didn't want to do it because it is such a big rabbit hole to go down. There is such a huge amount of knowledge that goes into it, and I'm still scratching the surface for you guys. I don't know how long that I'm going to keep on doing this. I really want to get somebody that is actually qualified to talk about these things to come on and share that information with you guys. There is a couple different guys out there on YouTube that are actually very, very well-to-do and very, very extremely knowledgeable in this department. Specifically, I think that these kind of videos are not only going to make every single coon hunter out there better off, they're going to make dog breedings better off for the coonhounds. They're going to make these animals that much better. We're going to produce consistency. We're going to turn this thing around. We're not going to have these elite animals falling off or dying out because we don't know how to reproduce them. We are not going to have this kind of issue if we can all kind of learn the knowledge of this genetics, and we can all kind of understand how things are technically supposed to be done when it comes down to reproducing animals and breeding animals correctly. A lot of guys just kind of keep it in their pocket. Yep, we got the really good one. We're going to breed on them. We're not going to tell anybody how we do it. We're just going to sell all our coals. Okay, so that is the biggest thing that happens, and guys need to understand this, is a lot of the coals of the coonhound breeds are what we're allowed to purchase, or what we're allowed to get our hands on out of these good bloods. Okay, so unless we're paying very good money for a non-coal dog, that's what we're putting our hands on 9 times out of 10 is we're putting our hands on a coal. I don't want to sit there and call you guys' dog a coal because it's not 100% a fact, but a lot of times guys are getting rid of dogs because they're coals. A lot of times the guys are passing on dogs because they are coals. Does that mean that they're just not worth anything? No, some of them dogs turn out okay. Some of them dogs still hunt. Some of them dogs still do what they need to do. They are coals on the thinking of it's not a world champ. But anyway, guys, again, let me wrap this thing up. Y'all have a good one. Y'all keep them treed.